All right, trying this out again. The live format for YouTube is difficult, we'll say. I would be doing this in landscape format, but I think that's been removed in favor of this more TikTok-y vibe. Anyway, I installed a TV in here so I can do this more easily because the way that comments roll in doesn't work out all that well. So I'm just doing some feeding this tonight about doing some feeding of some of the snakes that we have in our collection. They're not really fed on a schedule. They're fed when they need to be. So today that is one of those things where we're actually doing feeding of multiple individuals. This message was held for review. All right. Hi. I will get better at this live thing later. I think that just because of the format, they're trying very hard to compete or something with other formats that are more oriented like this. So every time I log into it, it's a little bit different. Anyway, that is a mottled rock rattlesnake you're looking at that is eating a mouse that I put in there recently. I mean, if anybody's seen a snake eat before, this is pretty much the same thing, except it's a rattlesnake. These mice are purchased in bulk as frozen animals. So the snake did not kill this mouse. It's kind of the safest way to do it. And also it's just not, let me see here. Kansas City. How many different species of rattlesnakes does Arizona have? It depends on who you ask and which book you're reading. So if you're following Arizona Game and Fish and the book that just came out, Snakes of Arizona, I think 2 years ago now or 3 years ago, there are 13 species and some of those are subspecies. So you have things like the western rattlesnake that'll be divided up in some books and not in others. So I would say that 13, 15, and 18 and 17 are all correct answers depending on how you feel about certain things. But in any case, we have more species here than any other state by quite a bit. This particular one that you're watching eat actually comes from Texas. We don't really have a lot of animals from other states here, but this one was from a friend who needed to get rid of it, needed a new good home for it, so he's retired here now. The snake is, anyway. Now let's see who else needs to eat. All right, I got a guy. This guy's a good feeder. And if you see calcium deposits on the water bowls, don't worry. We're on a well, so we have very rough water here. And I have everything on maximum ventilation, so these water bowls dry out very quickly, leaving essentially crystals behind. Very fast. That is a speckled rattlesnake. Trying to figure out the best way to do this. I actually figured out how to make the comments work better. I put a TV in here so I can see what I'm doing on a larger screen while my phone is occupied. He's taking his time. Why don't I feed him live mice? Lots of reasons. First is that there's no reason to, in most cases. There are people that get a particular thrill out of watching an animal die in agony. That's not me, or what we're going to do. Another thing is that this is a better way to do it. These are animals, I know where they come from. We buy them in bulk by the hundreds, and we're able to store them and feed them when we need, instead of getting it from a breeder where we don't really know at any given time what might be in those animals. This mouse right here cost me 17 cents as opposed to, I don't know, $4, whatever the going rate is for live mice. And also, the reason why these animals have venom is because they don't want to get into it with a mouse. A mouse or a rat can actually injure or kill a snake. It happens. So in the wild, this snake would bite this mouse, and the mouse would run off and die somewhere else. And then the snake would go and find it later after it's dead and eat it. But in an enclosure, that's not what happens. So if you ever watch somebody live feed mice to their snakes, what happens is the snake bites it, and then the mouse is running around biting anything it can. It's freaking out, and that's a really good way to injure the snake. So those are some of the reasons that I don't feed live when we can. There are some snakes that we have to feed live, and kind of the goal there is to get them not to. Like if I have to feed a live mouse to something, I'm there watching it the whole time to make sure that mouse doesn't become a problem. Yeah, give it a minute. So kind of like what I was just saying, the snake, after it, in its perspective, kills some prey, it gives it time to run off. The mouse runs off and dies, and then the snake later goes and hunts it down and finds it. So that's what you're about to see here, is that snake bit something, it, simulated, ran off and died, and now it's going to go find it, which is not very far. And there it is. Easy. He's got to find the head. Yeah, no problem. That's why we have these things. Give someone else one while we're waiting. You have to warm up the frozen mice so they get frozen. I've got a couple here, hang on a sec. So how do you switch a snake from eating live mice to frozen thawed ones? Well, the first thing is just make sure that they're healthy and comfortable. So if the snake is not eating, a lot of times feeding live is basically just buying time so that you can continue to work with the animal so that it isn't stressed out, that it has the right enclosure so that it feels comfortable doing that. So that's how I view it. If something's only eating live, then a lot of times there's something that is causing it to not feel great about that situation. Not always the case, but sometimes you can do things like kind of a bait and switch. So I do that with baby snakes, where you put in something that's live, they strike at it and then venomate it, and then that kind of kicks off a feed response. So you replace that mouse with a frozen thawed one so you can get kind of used to it. You can also assist feed so they get used to the taste of it. I've done that before, it works really good. So it's a complicated thing. I would say the first thing is if your snake is not eating for you in the way that you want, first thing is look at the husbandry, look at the enclosure, look at the, make sure it has enough hides. That's a huge thing that people overlook is the snake has a place to hide, but they can still see it. The snake wants to get to not see you when it's busy doing this, because at this point it's basically defensive. I guess that's the same question for both, but do I warm up the mice, or is it frozen? Yeah, they have to be at least thawed out, but it makes it a lot easier if you warm them up. I'll show you what I got going on over here. They are under a heat lamp at a reasonable distance so they can thaw out and be a little bit warmer than the surroundings so that they can see it. Let's see who else needs one. Some of these guys are being real picky, but it happens. Currently, the only ones that have to eat live are the montanes. We have one of the ridge-nosed and one of the twin spots out of the 4 that we have. We'll only eat live still, but we're working on that. I like how Jeff's comment is the only one that got moderated out. I'll show it, but if you do that again, Jeff, you're gonna be banned. Ball python hasn't eaten in 4 months. So I would try different food. I would try different things with the enclosure. I would make sure that it has lots of places to hide. And also for a ball python, that's not necessarily bad. I mean, look at the weight of it. It might not be hungry. Ball pythons get overfed a lot. I think that's one of the things that is a misconception with keeping snakes, is that you need to feed them every week or feed them every few days or something like that. And that's not the case. So if you look at this snake last ate on March 9th. So I can update that right now, actually. With so many rattlesnakes in shrinking habitat, why do we relocate so many? Well, the situation is that as the urban area expands, then it keeps getting into conflict with all these animals. So the ultimate goal, I mean, we're not going to win over development, but if development can be done and the people moving into those areas are done in such a way and are educated in such a way that they can coexist with the animals that are there, then you have a good situation, or a better situation anyway. And that happens too. I mean, there's places around, that's actually where we're studying the Phoenix Mountain Preserve, where there's kind of an equilibrium. There are lots of snakes there are lots of people there, nobody's dying, nobody's being bitten, and it's fine, and that's kind of what you want. Well, it sounds like, James, it's probably time to go to a vet. There could be something else going on there too. I mean, if an animal's eating really reliably and then stops, that could be a lot of things. So I would start there. Let's see who else we got. Some of these snakes are kind of secretive, so. I wish I could turn this thing sideways. I'll do it later. It helps. I think the last time I did this, the comments that would show up on the live for YouTube would like disappear after 2 seconds, so you couldn't actually see anything, especially if you were talking at the time. Let's see. Okay. Here's another speckled. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a complicated topic, and I know that there's a lot of people that would just prefer that there weren't rattlesnakes, but there are complications to that. You can't just remove a major predator from the environment without repercussions. There you go. He's gonna get into it. This guy's kind of finishing up here. Yeah, if she hasn't lost weight and still has a healthy weight, then it might not be a problem. Sometimes it's not uncommon for them to just not eat. And like our animals, there's no feeding schedule. I'm feeding them all right now just because I try to sync it up when I can, and I'm looking ahead to when I'm gonna be leaving the country for a while in July. So I'm just making sure everybody's in a good place to be able to do that. But we look at the body weight. We don't look at, these animals haven't eaten. It's Wednesday, it's feeding day. We don't do that. We look at how do these animals look? Do they look like a healthy animal in the wild, or do they look like a zoo sausage, which happens a lot? Most of our rattlesnakes eat about every 5 weeks. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on what's going on. If it's growing, if it's young, if it is gravid, then it'll get more food until it decides to stop. But if it's an old male, like this guy you're seeing right here, he doesn't eat that much. Yes, you can only have native venomous in Arizona in captivity, and not even all of them. You have to have permits for some, which we do. And I think it's a good idea. I think that Arizona would have a lot of problems. Think of like a desert version of Florida if we could just bring everything in here. Yeah, zoo sausage, It's unfortunate because there's educational value in feeding, but when there's like, it's like, hey, it's come see our live feedings every Friday where something eats a giant rat that it doesn't need. It's not great for the animals. What is the rarest species of rattlesnake? That's a hard one because there's rarely seen and actual animals that are rare. I mean, it would be one of the Mexican ones, maybe transversus. And if you haven't heard of that, that's because it's one of the rarest species of rattlesnake. I can't remember the pronunciation of the other one, Tinsidieris, I think. There's like 10 of them I've ever seen. Probably pronouncing that wrong. How do they hunt in the wild? Let me see if I have any that are hunting. Hang on, let's see. Let's see, is anybody hunting in here? No. Oh, yep, we got a hunter here. Let me show you. Here is a prairie rattlesnake in an ambush coil, waiting for stuff. This is enclosure, there's a little wind in there. I like stuff like that. Are there mixed breed rattlesnakes? There are. It happens in the wild occasionally. There's some places where they have a sustained population of hybrid rattlesnakes, but typically, no. People do it in captivity too, but that's not great. Yeah, eastern Massasaugas are very, they're not doing great. Their habitat is being destroyed. So it is very possible to find multiples in one area. Like, look at him, he's on it. But it doesn't mean that they're not, they're locally abundant is what that is. They can be found in good numbers in the places where their situation is perfect, but that marshy habitat where they require is now almost gone, so. I didn't say he's good at hunting, he is hunting. There we go. Yeah, I mean, you can artificially create hybrid rattlesnakes like that. I mean, there are some instances of hybridization between eastern diamondbacks and timber rattlesnakes, but it doesn't mean it's great. I mean, imagine that how confused an animal like that be that has very different instructions on how to live, on how to be an animal. So it's probably a problem for it. And also just that animal, I know which one you're talking about. Holding that snake in that way is incredibly dangerous. That's a lot of venom, and a canebrake rattlesnake has a strong neurotoxic element to its venom. Between those two, I mean, that's if that guy were bitten, and he will be at some point. I mean, I've seen when he picks up that snake and it's rattling at him. I mean, there's a known ending to how this works out, and hopefully he survives it. But yeah, that's a big bad snake. Just because it's so stressed out all the time that it doesn't strike readily does not mean it's tame. So you can throw it in a swimming pool, some guys, and I mean, it might seem interesting to some people, but people that know what they're looking at there's other words that come to mind. I was curious if a Mojave and Diamondback breed. It can happen, very rarely. A study done on hybridization of rattlesnakes around the Continental Divide, where there was a lot of animals that looked like they were hybrids, ended up not being. They were hybrids between prairie rattlesnakes and Mojave rattlesnakes, but Diamondbacks and Mojaves did not. It happens, I'm sure, on occasion, but it is not something that is widespread. It would be an accident. How long will they sit like that waiting for prey to walk by? Sometimes for many days. It really depends on if they can. So in Arizona in particular, where it's just really hot often, they're not gonna have that opportunity. They're gonna be sitting out in ambush, and then once that sun hits it, it's like a laser, and it's not a survivable situation. So they're gonna have to move around a lot. So if there's a spot that looks like a good place to hunt, and that could be because of success of previous hunts, or it smells a mouse that's tracking, whatever it is, it might try that spot for multiple consecutive days, coming out to hunt in that spot before it either gives up or succeeds. And whether it gives up or succeeds might decide for it whether it's going to be rolled into a repeat hunting spot somewhere. So they learn from those things. Yeah, he survived a king cobra bite already. I mean, it's not great for the resume. Yeah, I like venomous snakes too. I'm not going to handle one. I think the nearest approximation that I have for people that free handle is equate it to firearms. Okay, you have, let's say that you have a large and robust and diverse community of people in the country that enjoy recreational firearms, and then you have some idiots that have a YouTube channel or something where they get views by pointing a loaded gun to their head. It's the same thing. So yeah, it creates some cheap views, but for everybody else that's trying to make this a thing of responsibility and education, it just makes us all look like fools. So cool, hold your venomous snakes, guy that has the bat wing, but don't confuse yourself with an educator. And you're making life harder for other people that are doing that work, unfortunately. Has anyone on my team ever been bitten by a rattlesnake? I have. It was a dry bite, thankfully. We don't have antivenom. We can't have it. It's not something you want to just give yourself. It can hurt you by itself. It's a foreign protein that needs to be put in good quantities, and it's also incredibly expensive. So thankfully in Arizona, we have lots of availability of that. Rattlesnakes are common here, so we would call 911. And I also personally, and everyone on the team, we have access to a lot of good experts. So when if I am ever bitten by a rattlesnake that requires hospitalization, I am thankful to say there would definitely be a team of people working on my behalf. Are all rattlesnakes live birth? Yes. There are no rattlesnakes that lay eggs. In fact, all but one New World viper, all but one viper that lives in the Americas gives live birth. The exception is Bushmaster. What kind of rattlesnakes are in Georgia? You have eastern diamondbacks, big cool snakes. You have timber rattlesnakes, or canebrake rattlesnakes they're called there, and pygmy rattlesnakes. I think there's two kinds that are there. A dusky and it's Carolina. I don't remember the common name for it. I think that's it. But you also have copperheads and cottonmouths. Yeah, in the right places, all those animals are really common. So I've been to things that are rare in one place. So an example in Arizona would be the sidewinders. They're, you can hike in Arizona your entire life and never see a sidewinder. You could hike here your entire life and never see a Mojave. But they're incredibly common where they are. And the reason that people don't see them is because people don't hike in the places where those animals are common. So like the eastern Massasaugas that we were talking about, they may be locally abundant in some places, but one of the reasons that people rarely see them is because they live in marshy habitat that it's not a great place to go ride a bike. Yes, eastern diamondbacks do have the potential to become larger than western diamondbacks. That is being stressed though lately because it's Florida and just the areas where they live don't have large contiguous spaces in the same way that the West does anymore. So there's a lot more roads. And also just the general attitudes towards wildlife are not very well developed. So people see a big eastern diamondback out there in the forest far from anybody and it's 25 or 30 years old and it'll get shot for a selfie. Like that happens out there very commonly. So eastern diamondbacks can get much larger than western diamondbacks, but few of them get the chance to do that anymore. So where it may have been common years ago to see routinely a 5 to 6 foot or maybe even more eastern diamondback, most of them are a lot smaller now that people are going to see. The biggest one I've ever seen personally was maybe just under 6 feet, and that was on one of the barrier islands in Georgia. So not subject to the same redneckery as the rest of the population. Thanks, Tammy. I appreciate that. I know it's a tough subject a lot of times because it's something that, the fear of them is real, but you just got to look at them for a while. This, when there's not a lot of, the focus is not great here, so it makes these enclosures look really terrible. I swear they're not that bad. They're just opaque. Okay. 5:41. I'm gonna start feeding some guys here, and then I'm gonna get back to. I might go look for snakes around. This is a Panamint rattlesnake, by the way, from Nevada. What do you think? Oh God, you're out of practice. There we go. There we go. Yeah, there's a lot of them up there. Camp Verde and Sedona. Lots of blacktails, diamondbacks, black rattlesnakes. Can I go over what types of rattlesnakes are common in the different areas of Arizona? All right, that is it's a large, complicated question, but I'll answer as briefly as I can. So in the lower desert areas, basically below the rim, in general, that's where you see the desert type rattlesnakes. That'd be western diamondbacks, specialists like Mojave rattlesnakes, sidewinders, speckleds, tigers, and then lower forms of blacktails. I'm sure I'm missing a few. in there. And then north of the rim or on the rim, you get a lot of other ones that have very large ranges. So you have the whole western complex, that would be the Great Basin, Grand Canyon, midget faded, Arizona black rattlesnakes, prairie rattlesnakes, and the previous sub that got sunk of Hopi rattlesnakes. And then also black rattlesnakes kind of bridge that gap as well with blacktails showing up sporadically in there. And then there's Massasaugas popping up here and there, and little, probably more little islands of habitat than we understand. So as you travel across the state, there's a ton of diversity that basically matches the diversity of habitat that we have. In Arizona, with the Grand Canyon being a huge geographic barrier, and all the, you know, you can, the high grasslands you can find by the border up to the grasslands up in the northeastern part of the state, convergence of multiple deserts. There's just a ton of diversity of habitat types and isolation opportunities, and that's why I have so many species. What made me to decide to keep these snakes versus release? So these are mostly animals that can't be released, and that's it. So if I were to keep snakes that I found, then, you know, we would need a much bigger building. This one in particular, this one was kept by somebody in Nevada, and he gifted it to us so we could use it for our program. I mean, we have a lot of, let me unattach this thing. We have lots of different, you know, this guy was a research animal. It's a banded rock rattlesnake. It's a prairie rattlesnake that was surrendered to us. This guy was basically rescued. This one we bred in captivity. This one's hiding. She was gifted to us. This one is gifted to us. This one was poached and surrendered to us. So we got all kinds of stories here behind them. This one was wild caught. That one we did take out of the wild. And the reason for that is because it comes from an area where there's no sampling of its venom. So we needed that. So we collected 2 of them to help with that study. And now we have, well, that's part of that study. It's understood. Here's a twin spotted rattlesnake sitting there hoping I'll give it another mouse. Sorry, guy, I'm not. That one was one of the ones that was wild collected too, but the reason is because we don't want to keep wild collecting stuff. So that's one of those animals that's kind of reliant on people poaching it for animals in captivity. Sounds bad, it is bad. It means that whenever you see one of those animals in a zoo in Arizona, it got that way because somebody took it illegally and it got surrendered. So by breeding them under permit, we are able to provide those to institutions and not be education based on a poaching economy. Yeah, thanks. I mean, there's a lot of snake content, but we're trying to do it a little different, so it's not so, like, it's not so based on fear. Totally doesn't have to. No one's gonna be jumping around, freaking out on our channel. What's my favorite rattlesnake? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I like whichever one I'm looking at the time. I had a Mexican West Coast rattlesnake that was surrendered to us. We ended up giving it to a zoo because it didn't have any educational value in our program. And we do have animals that don't have any educational value in our program, meaning that it's just, here's a big snake. But this one was going to be probably 6 feet long, and it was incredibly defensive, very difficult to deal with. So I thought it'd be best to rehome that one rather than have an unnecessary risk. Do rattlesnakes bite and envenomate each other when in combat? Generally, no. Generally, those bouts, those wrestling matches are just to stress each other out, to tire each other down, to show who's toughest. You know, Jeff and I saw that. We had a really good instance of that. And a conversation while we were watching it earlier this year, we were kind of saying they're not really causing a lot of physical damage. What is the reason why one would give up? And the answer, I think, might be just because of how stressful it is. I mean, imagine, you know, you're running and you get tired. Their muscles work very differently. The way they work with oxygen and the way that they stress hormones are released and maintained is very different. So to maintain a high level of stressful activity like that can be damaging or even deadly to them. So that might be one of the elements. But typically they don't envenomate each other. And that, again, the only reason I'm using typically is because I saw in one instance, this is something I still need to write up. It's an interesting natural history note. where there was a male rattlesnake that would not agree to fight, basically, by the prompting of a larger male, and he bit and envenomated the rival. So apparently it happens occasionally. Nope, that's not a timber rattlesnake. Actually, that's an Arizona black rattlesnake from a weird area. So we'll see. Yes, Marissa does like specks. They're cool snakes. Actually, I think next week we're all going to come up to our property and look for some. I think we're going to do a live video next week, I think Wednesday. I don't know if we decided that or not, but we're going to do a live to cover a bunch of comments that we've gotten. You might have noticed that there were some comments that we said, we just kind of pinned them and said, yeah, thanks, we'll address this later, or we're going to address those. And then afterwards, we're going to go look for snakes on my property, so we'll see. You live in the state line of North Carolina and South Carolina, a woman here. Read this. So I think it's interesting that someone doing snake relocation would advocate for people cutting the heads off of those animals. I mean, they might. It's hard to say what happens to a head that's cut off. But that's a thing in the West too, where people say, well, when you cut the head off a rattlesnake, you need to bury the head 6 feet into the ground, or else it can still bite you. That means that for a while, you have a decapitated head that can still bite and envenomate, and you're messing with it. You're digging a hole, you're putting it in a Mountain Dew can while you're finding a shovel. Like, this is how people are bitten by rattlesnakes. A sure way to not be bitten by a decapitated head of a rattlesnake is to leave the head on the snake and walk the other direction. That works way better. Did the one that got envenomated die? I don't know. It crawled away with some blood pooling on its back, and did not see it again. So it's possible. Rattlesnakes are not immune to their own venom or venom from other snakes. They can be highly resistant to it. It probably survived, but I've also seen rattlesnakes that have died because of their own bite on accident. So definitely not a sure thing. Yeah, they might. Who knows? Do we get calls from Chandler? Not often. I mean, we do, but they're usually not rattlesnakes. One of the reasons for that is that rattlesnakes don't really like agriculture here. For whatever reason, in the ag areas, we don't get a lot of rattlesnakes. We get gopher snakes and other stuff, and usually those situations can be diffused with the homeowner by just kind of talking them through it, which is what we prefer. We do remove harmless snakes as well, but I think a lot of times we're just trying to. Okay, where are you going? You come over here. When do rattlesnakes mate? Depends on the species, but they usually have the lower desert ones that have warm temperatures most of the year, they can breed every year. They tend to mate in the spring and can also have a mating period in the fall and retain that sperm to become gravid in the spring. Other snakes like Arizona black rattlesnakes and the ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, they tend to be fall breeders. So they mate in the fall and become gravid in the spring, and then give birth in the summer. Yeah, if a snake envenomates another one, it can affect it. A guy that I know that is very knowledgeable about snakes, very, very knowledgeable, but I don't agree on all the aspects of some of the conclusions on things. Gave some advice once a long time ago that speckled rattlesnakes would learn how to eat from the mothers. So the best way to feed them and get them to eat would be to leave the babies in there with the mothers so that, or the pinkies, so that the mothers can teach them. And I watched the mother very quickly put a fang directly through the top of the head of one of their babies. So that snake survived because the fang went all the way through. This guy is not good at hunting. Yeah, they're highly resistant to the venom, but definitely can die from it. Which rattlesnake has the least venom toxicity in the US? Probably, and I would have to see if this has been updated. It's been a long time since I've looked, but sidewinders. So the least toxic venom. But it's also kind of like asking which bonfire is best to jump in through, or which rollover accident is best. Still a trip to the hospital in a helicopter. This is a banded rock rattlesnake. It is a massive banded rock rattlesnake. This one was part of some telemetry study long ago, and was going to be in a pickle jar at ASU, or that's probably what was going to happen, so we were able to take it and give it a home here. We've had it for 10 years now, so it's a big old snake. I mean, some might mate in May. I think in cooler environments they might. I've seen, depends on where your grandma's from. In Idaho, where I've done a lot of work with Great Basin rattlesnakes, May is when they mate. I mean, in previous years, I would be up there right now at a den watching them, and a lot of that is mating. And they might mate in the fall too, so. How long are just born rattlesnakes? Depends on the size of the adult snake, but typically small snakes have a pretty large body ratio of the neonates to the adults compared to larger snakes. So I would say, let's just talk about Western Diamondbacks, because that's the one that is most common here that people mostly see. A neonate Western Diamondback would be around 8 to 10 inches or so, typically. Besides seek medical attention immediately by being bit. All of them. So this is Justin, it's an interesting thing, because, so think of it this way. What other internal medical emergencies do we insist upon there being first aid for? And that's what this is. It is an internal envenomation. It's happening in your bloodstream. So anything that is impacting your body's ability to process that is bad. Tourniquets, any of the suction devices, anything that's on the market intended to slow down or restrict venom, Benadryl, any of the homeopathic stuff, all that stuff can only make it worse. So that's why, when we say things like call 911 and that's the only thing, it's not really like a lazy answer. It is the only answer. It's like if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have no chance of getting help from it and you have a heart attack, what do? I mean, you call 911, or you hope for the best. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty similar to that. So you really want to try to get help, because there's nothing, the difference between getting antivenom and not getting antivenom can be life and death. There are no devices, there are no first aid solutions that will affect that really in any way. Don't tourniquet the limb. Exactly, yeah, don't tourniquet the limb. Some recent information changes that I haven't seen proliferate everywhere is that the older advice that even we used to give, because that's what the advice was to hold the extremity, if you're bitten, below the heart level. The more recent advice is to elevate the limb. What is the process to keep a live rattlesnake legally? Unfortunately, you just get one. If you have a hunting license, it's legal to have a rattlesnake, most of them. And there's ones here that are protected that you can't, but I wish that weren't the case. It's not that I hate freedom, it's that these animals are often kept for reasons other than curiosity or a natural interest in the animal. It's a thing that people have often, where it's just they don't have a personality or conviction to safety that should allow something like this to be kept in a fish tank in their kitchen with other kids. Or there's one guy on TikTok that I've seen recently who's been kind of prevalent lately for one reason or another that has, you know, the snakes are in just barren enclosures, no hides, nothing like that, stressed out constantly. He's just holding it, free handling it, that kind of thing. I think that there should be some sort of, you know, some kind of low bar to be able to keep these. Currently it's having a hunting license, but I mean, the irony of that kind of behavior is that is where laws come from. And I can, you know, I'm not gonna say too much, but we'll say, yeah, I'll leave it there. That's where laws come from. So when I had my first rattlesnake, I just had a hunting license, that was it. And this was before I had Rattlesnake Solutions, it was before I started it by several months. So I kind of knew I wanted to get into education and this kind of stuff. I didn't have any understanding that this could be a, I guess, possibility. And I knew it was, you know, to take it very seriously, the safety and way you handle these animals needs to be taken very seriously. Favorite channel, thank you. That's awesome. We hit 50,000 subs today. That's still a little teeny tiny channel, but considering it's growing, we were just talking about when we hit 30 like a month ago, so it's crazy. Yeah, baby rattlesnakes, 8 inches or so. That's a typical baby rattlesnake size. Some can be smaller, like Massasaugas or the twin spotted rattlesnakes when they were born. Ridiculously small, little teeny tiny things that had to be hand fed. Why is the snake dragging the mouse? Okay, picture this. You're in your living room and there's no furniture in it. And you're trying to eat a watermelon whole. And you can't use your hands. That's the situation. So the snake is moving the prey around, trying to get leverage on it so he can push his face over the top of it, basically. That was awesome to hear, thanks. I think, we think our job's, it's pretty exciting, but you know, the ultimate thing is if we can get somebody that's like, and this happens, people that are so scared of snakes in general that they are considering moving out of the state, and get those people to where they actually appreciate or even look forward to seeing a rattlesnake when they're hiking. That is a great feeling for us, and that happens. The Mojave is let's see. Okay, so is a Mojave rattlesnake's venom more lethal? Sometimes. So it has a lot of venom. There's a lot of, its venom makeup is complicated and diverse, and it changes regionally. So in some places, Mojave rattlesnakes have incredibly toxic venom, and in some places, not so much. In some places, it will cause more damage to tissue. In other places, it doesn't. So the whole situation changes once you have antivenom available. When you have antivenom available, then things that are neurotoxins that are not going to cause a lot of tissue damage might make for an easier healing. So if you were to measure, you know, deadliest bite by causing deaths, having caused deaths, then Mojave rattlesnakes are not in the you know, top 5 rattlesnakes in the country for that. They have a potential to do it, but you know, if I was bitten by a Mojave rattlesnake right now, I wouldn't like it, obviously, but I don't think it would be the most harmful thing out of the things that's in this room. A really big Western Diamondback is gonna kill you faster than a normal sized Mojave. It also depends on the way that your body reacts to it. Everybody's gonna react differently to venom, just the way that, you know, some people have different color of hair regionally based on where you're at. Venom makeup can be part of that as well. We have a couple of Mojaves. Actually, currently I have a whole bunch of Mojaves because we had bred some last year and we're distributing those currently. Oh, can I tell you more about the snake that was under the kid's bed or under the bed? Yeah, that was a snake we removed a few years ago. I can't remember exactly the situation, but I can say about snakes in houses, it is exceedingly rare. So whenever we post something like that, it tends to get a lot of attention. It should. It's interesting and scary, and I don't want a rattlesnake in my house loose like that. But it almost always happens because of very preventable ways. The door is left open. In almost all those cases, it's somebody that's moved here from the Midwest. It's a nice, beautiful day. It's 75 degrees outside. What do you do if you live in a place that doesn't have rattlesnakes? You leave the door open and let some air come in, and a rattlesnake comes in. That is the primary way that rattlesnakes get into homes. Sliding doors being left open. So that's what happened there, is that door was left open. I think the person was moving, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't really their fault, but out of the 1,400 or so rattlesnakes that we capture and move in any given year, fewer than 10 are inside homes. How do I deal with hostile members of the public who are angry for not killing rattlesnakes? Well, it used to be with anger. I used to have a harder time with negative comments, but I think, I've been doing this a long time now. If negative comments got under my skin, I would be, it would be not the career for me, right? But I think look at the comments that people leave sometimes. A lot of them we just delete. So I think when people leave the shotgun comments or how they would kill it and that kind of thing, the biggest annoyance of it is not that what they're saying. It's literally that I have to go and make 3 clicks and delete it to not annoy everybody else. That is the extent of the annoyance of those hostile comments. The fact is that if someone is actually angry with me and is not just trolling and actually believes that we are endangering the public by preserving rattlesnakes, then the fact is that they have a profound misunderstanding of the situation. And it's easy for me to deal with that because having a lot of the information that would rectify that, it's just plainly false. So if somebody is actually upset with us on that level, the choice then is theirs to accept our offer of information and learn how that's not the case, or remain ignorant. So that's not something that's going to upset me. That's a choice that someone else makes. I don't like it when people, there's people that take it over the line sometimes, but thankfully there's block buttons. Pretty nice sized diamondback in New Mexico. Yeah, they are big out there. Aaron, that is great to hear. Yeah, it just doesn't, you don't have to love standing next to a rattlesnake, but I think our goal is just don't kill them, because it doesn't help anybody. That's the big thing, is if people were to, there's a video I've been trying to think about how to make forever. We want to kind of do some funny stuff sometimes that show how ridiculous the logic around rattlesnakes is once you apply it to other situations. And there's one that's kind of been bouncing around my head for a while, which is where you have, maybe Jeff and I will be sitting in some chairs or something, and I'll have to figure out how to do this, but something in a bucket that is attracting a ton of flies, and we just sit there and have a conversation about the situation, and while we're talking, there's just flies crawling all over us, and we swat the flies occasionally, and every time that we swat one, we go, well, the problem's solved. There's not going to be any more flies here. And it never occurs to us because of that process, because every time we kill one, it stops the thinking process. It never occurs to us to remove the source of the flies. And that is very much like the way that rattlesnakes are with a lot of this stuff. So, we're not saying you don't have to love them, but try to, if you're understanding and you can look at them now and you're learning like that, that's perfect. That's all we need. I don't love horses. I actually I actively dislike horses. I know, but I'm not gonna go saw one's head off or something. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be able to work with them too. I mean, that's one of the things that's coolest is because of our work. We get so many cool opportunities to go and travel and see amazing things and work with people that are idols of ours sometimes, you know, growing up reading about reptiles, and now we're working with some of these people, so it's really cool. Yeah, exactly. Just keep your distance. I mean, I enjoy seeing mountain lions. Doesn't mean I'm gonna, you know, want to be right next to one. How dangerous are Sierra Nevada rattlesnakes? There are a number of them that live in that area. I mean, nothing in particularly special. I mean, I think that there's the diversity there is kind of similar. If you're bitten, it's going to work with crowfab, so, or Antivenom. If you're bitten by an unknown rattlesnake, how do they determine the antivenom to use? Timely question. So that's easy. You don't need to know what kind it is. The two antivenoms on the market right now are both polyvalent antivenoms, which means that they are made from antibodies reactions to multiple venom types. So a favorite bit of misinformation from from Southern California, especially southeastern California, is that Mojave rattlesnakes are especially dangerous because there's no antivenom for it. That is not true at all. So any rattlesnake that bites you, in fact, any pit viper in the United States that bites you is going to use the same antivenom. Doctors, the most knowledgeable ones there are not going to recommend that you even, you know, other than just for the epidemiology aspect of it, perhaps. It's not going to necessarily impact their treatment. They're going to be looking at the symptoms and treating those. Yeah, I saw that KPNX story about they brought the rattlesnake in. Wait, maybe not. Hang on. Sorry, James. I thought you were talking about the story last week where there was the firefighters brought the rattlesnake to the to the hospital. A couple was ready for bed. Went to the bedroom. Diamondback was under a bed. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that could happen, but it's not typical. Doors left open, things can come in. Is there a video in southern Indiana? Not one that I have. I'm not sure. Actually, if you're in that area, a great place that you might want to take your daughter, look up Snake Road. Incredible thing, very easy. Every fall at LaRue, they close down a section of the road so that they can, people can enjoy the snakes. It's really cool. I'm sure there's a lot of videos about it. Look up Snake Road. I'm a little bit behind here. Why do sidewinders have horns? I'm gonna feed this one while we're doing that. So sidewinders, convergently, there's a sidewinder that lives in Africa, the Middle East, that also has horns. It is not in any way closely related to a sidewinder rattlesnake. So there's something about living in a hot, sandy environment that causes those animals to have those horns. And the exact reasons for it, unless it's been discovered relatively recently and I'm not aware of it, is not really known. Thank you, new sub. Yeah, if you had a rattlesnake in your house, that's... Let's see. Yeah, I agree on taking chances with rattlesnakes. It's not necessary, and it removes the educational aspect from the whole practice. So, we're doing our thing. We're not looking to have a conflict with anybody, but I think it'd be honest to say that. I think that it's unprofessional, we'll say, and I think that there are those of us that would prefer that the sensationalism of the animals, and you know that's one of the reasons why they get killed. So anybody that's promoting that sensationalism is feeding that fear and, you know, indirectly causing a lot of deaths of snakes. Do the rattlesnake shots to help if bitten? Yes, they do. That's antivenom. That's what you got to get. Well, I have the Gila monsters here, but they're not interested in eating. They're just wanting to sleep. Have you had to extract a rattlesnake out of an RV? Under RVs, pretty commonly, where that skirting goes around the side. That is awesome to hear you're hiking again. I bet next time you see one, if you see a rattlesnake on a trail, it's gonna suck. But stand back and just watch what it does. It's not gonna come towards you. And that time you have while you're just sitting there looking at it, it can change everything. You can dismantle that fear. It's really cool. So try that out next time if you do see one. Do I have any experience with canebrake or timber rattlesnakes? Yeah, we got one that hitched a ride and ended up in a gas thing here. But yeah, I've seen a bunch of them in the east. They are elusive. It's also just kind of hard to see them because of how camouflaged they are. They're big, secretive animals. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna finish this up because I got to. I want to go look for snakes. So let's feed this big one. Yeah, they finish up. They'll swallow the tail eventually. Okay. Now this one is not a rattlesnake. We'll see if he comes out. Yeah, I'd like to do more of these. The problem is just the trying to figure out the format. Every time I log into the YouTube Live, it's a little different, and also I have a hard time just scheduling stuff sometimes because this time of year, I mean, we're busy. If I'm spending an hour in here, it's an hour I'm not doing something else that's work with these guys, so it's hard to just kind of to get into it, but I think I will do this more. One thing that's useful is normally I don't have to feed this many snakes. This is more than I normally feed at one time. So it might be easier to maybe do this in a little, I don't know, like a half hour. That's probably good, right? The snake that is teasing on coming out is a big gopher snake. I don't know why he's being so sneaky, but he just is. All right, we'll see. What do you want? You want 2 mice? How about that? If I give you 2 mice, you'll be happier? Oh, yeah. 2 mice it is. yes, I do recommend rattlesnake aversion training. I do. There's a lot of different providers of it. Just make sure that they're using a shock correction device. That's one of the big things. It has not been shown that it's effective with positive reinforcement. And the shock devices do not hurt the dog. You can save your dog's life, so yeah, absolutely. I have worked with exactly one cobra. We spent 3 weeks in Asia looking for king cobras and only saw the one, so I was hoping for more, and that was it. But in July, I am going to India to run snake calls, where it's kind of the same situation as here, but instead of rattlesnakes there are cobras in homes. So that's going to be a good time. Let's see if I can film some of it. Do I only feed mice? No. A lot of these need a varied diet to survive too. It's not even that they need to survive. It's healthier for them. So some of them get quail chicks regularly and occasionally lizards too, to supplement. But for the most part, these mice are kind of the bulk of the diet. And they do pretty well on them. All right, well, thank you. I'm gonna go see if I can find some snakes outside. Is it dark yet? No, it's still daytime. What am I doing? Okay. What's going on that time? Well, I'm gonna go say hi to my family before I go look for snakes. So I'll do this again for sure. This TV situation definitely helps with that. But thank you for the good questions, everybody. And yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions, but we will do this again for sure. I think we'll figure it out. See ya.